This lesson was prepared for EDU 590, Technology and Education. It is about the effects of the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico and how students can learn how to be environmentally friendly. In order to explore how technology is effective in the delivery and outcome of a lesson plan, I created 2 lesson plans on an identical topic. The first did not incorporate any uses of technology, and the second included multiple uses of technology. Both of these lessons were delivered to a group of 4th grade students. Both sets of students were tested prior to and after the lessons to assess the overall success of each method. First, we have the non-technology lesson. The word environmental science was presented to the students on the whiteboard at the top of the KWL chart. I surveyed the students to see if they had ever heard of this word or knew what it meant. I explained to the students that environmental science was the study of the environment by people who work in laboratories or in the field. This activity was used as a pre-test to check for the students' prior understanding of the topic. The instructional strategy that was used was Advanced Organizer. Next, the students were given a packet of materials. The first item was a copy of a Time for Kids magazine with an article covering the oil spill that started in April 2010. After reading the article once as a class, I presented to the students some sentences about the article with some fill-in-the-blanks. I read the article again and stopped periodically to help prompt the students to find answers to the fill-ins. The instructional strategy that was used here was note-taking. Next, the students turned to an 8x10 map that showed the areas that were affected by the spill. They were given a black and white copy of the map due to cost. The instructional strategy that was used was non-linguistic representation. Also included in their packet was a comparison chart of the major oil spill disasters that have been reported over the world. The students were asked to reflect on what they saw. The instructional strategy used here was identifying similarities and differences. Next, the students were asked to brainstorm. As a class, I facilitated a discussion on ways that the students thought the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico could have been prevented, and ways that it could have been stopped once it began. These ideas were written on the board. The students were then asked to think of ways that they could help the environment in their communities and in the U.S. Some examples included recycling and cleaning up trash. The instructional strategies that were used were cooperative learning and generating hypotheses. Next was the post-test part of the lesson. The students were given a mini-test, and the first part was comprised of multiple-choice questions. The second part was the beginning and conclusion of a letter that each student would draft to the National Resources Defense Council, NRDC. The students were given several blank lines in the middle to tell the council about the spill and tell them what they had been inspired to do because of it. The multiple-choice questions allowed me to assess whether the students remembered the facts from the lesson, and the sentence starters allowed me to assess whether they were able to reflect on what they had learned and if they were inspired to do anything more. Below you will see an example of the sentence starters I provided for the students to help prompt their letter writing. After the students completed their mini-tests, we took their letters and mailed them to the National Resources Defense Council, so they were aware of what the class learned about protecting the environment. Next, we have the technology lesson. The word environmental science was presented to the students on the visualizer at the top of the KWL chart. The students were surveyed to see if they had ever heard of this word or knew what it meant. It was explained to the students that environmental science was the study of the environment by people who work in laboratories or in the field. The KWL chart from the following website was used. The instructional strategy was Advanced Organizer. On the visualizer, the class visited the website below. It was a Time for Kids news article. First, we read the article together. Then I presented to the students some sentences about the article with some fill-in-the-blanks. I read the article again and then stopped periodically to help prompt the students to find the answers to the blanks. Next, we had our math study. On the visualizer, I presented to the students an interactive online map tool at the website you see there. When you press play at the bottom of this page, you can start to watch the events of the oil spill from day 1 to day 100. The instructional strategy used here was non-linguistic representation. On the visualizer, the class viewed the website seen here. This contained comparison information about the major oil spill disasters that had been recorded over the world. The students were asked to reflect on what they saw. The instructional strategy that was used was identifying similarities and differences. Next, we brainstormed as a class. I facilitated a discussion on ways the students thought the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico could have been prevented and ways that it could have been stopped once it began. These ideas were written on the board. The students were then asked to think of ways that they could help the environment as a community and in the U.S. Some examples included recycling and cleaning up trash. The instructional strategy used here was cooperative learning and generating a hypothesis. For the post-test part of the lesson, the students were first given a multiple-choice section, and the second part was a beginning and conclusion of a letter that the students were to draft to the National Resources Defense Council, NRDC. The students were given several blank lines in the middle of the letter to tell the council about the spill and to tell them what they had been inspired to do because of the spill. The multiple-choice questions assessed whether the students remembered the facts and details from the lesson, and the sentence starters allowed me to assess whether they were able to reflect on what they had learned, and if they were inspired to do anything more. Below you will see the sentence starters and conclusion that I provided for the students to help prompt their letter writing. After the students completed their mini-test, I explained that an entry would be created on the classroom blog about what they had learned about the environment. Students were encouraged to add comments at any point in the year as they continued to learn new ways to protect the environment. Finally, we have the evaluation of these lessons. There were pros and cons with technology. The first pro was the handout cost effectiveness. The non-technology lesson was much more expensive due to the cost of printing the handouts for the students. I had even cut some handouts that I might have used due to cost, and I thought it would send the wrong message to give the students an extra large pack of papers when we were studying the environment. The next pro is visualization. Instead of just verbally describing the oil spill to the students, the interactive map was a great way to physically show them what had happened, and it was much more descriptive than the one-page map given with a non-technology lesson. I found that the test scores in the multiple-choice part of the test were about the same, which told me that the students do not necessarily learn facts better with technology, but the key was that there was a slight increase in the scores on the latter part of the post-test. The technology lesson resulted in better reflections on the part of the students. I concluded that this was due to the increased visualization of the technology lesson. It was evident that the simple visual ideas are the ones that tend to stick. Now we have the cons of the technology lesson. First, it was the unpredictability. I did not choose to play any lessons about the spill, even though there were many, because I was not confident in the ability of the computer to load the video and play it without interruption. Technology can be unpredictable in this way. I find that if you bookmark the websites you're using beforehand, it is helpful, but if you do not, time can be wasted. There's also always the possibility for bad links. I was impressed with the websites that I found, but if I planned to teach this lesson every year, I would not be confident in how long those sites would be available. With a non-technology lesson, I could just keep the original packet, make copies, and it would always be ready to go. And finally, we have my sources used for the lesson. Thank you very much for watching my video, and remember, we only have one Earth.